For this example, we're going to think about how we can write some C code to create a block of asterisks given the length of one side. So for instance, if the length of the side was 4, then it would give us this block of 4 by 4 asterisks. And then we'll take it a step at a time. Second example would be if we gave it input of 4, it would give us 4 rows where the length of the final row is 4, and it gives us this triangle shape, right triangle. And then lastly, given an input of 4, this middle row would be of size 4, but it gives us this diamond shape pattern, which if you think about it, is sort of like this top diamond here, this triangle, except for instead of displaying it in this shape, we move it over. So we display it in that shape, and then we just put another one underneath it that does the opposite like that to give us this diamond down there. So that is the approach that we're going to take for this, and we'll start with the one up above here and take it a step at a time. So in Dev C++, we can start out with some template code, paste it in here, and in this case we're going to have int size, but we're getting ahead of ourselves again. Got to put our comments in here. Illustrate printing different patterns of asterisks. Okay, good enough for now. So we'll say our size is equal to 4 for now, and we got that message at the end. So the first one that we want to do is this block of asterisks that we see up here, that block of asterisks. So let's try that. So display, so just like if you may have seen a previous example of a multiplication table, we want to think about it in steps. So we can display, so we'd have a loop saying display all the rows. And inside of this, we'd have another loop that would be display a single row. And so our for loop out here would have a for loop. We've got rows and columns, so in row and column for our loop counters. So down here I'll say for the row is equal to 1, row is less than the size, and the size is what's given right up here. And then row plus plus increments, and then we have this code down here. We want to put the closing. Okay, and then to display a single row, it's going to be for column equals 1. Column is less than size. Column plus plus, like this. And now we want to put the print statement in here. So we want to print a single asterisk, probably with a space after it so that they're spaced out. And that's it. That's what we want to do. And after we print each row, we also want to print a new line. Otherwise, they'll all come out in one big long line together. So if we go in and run this program now, we should see what we want. We'll call this asterisks 1. And there's our, well, but it's 3 by 3, so it's not quite right. So what did we do wrong? Well, it starts at 1 and goes to less than size. So if we started at 0 for our counter, then that should take care of things. Nope, we forgot something else. Same thing here. How about that? Sure is nice that the computer can give us some hints as we compile things. There we go, 4 by 4, just what we wanted. So the next step is to change the program and to get this. So as we go through each row, at each row we don't print 4 in each row. The first row we print 1, second row we print 2, third row we print 3, fourth row we print 4. So the row number, as the row number goes up, so if this is row number 1, 2, 3, 4, the row number tells us how many to print in that row. So let's go back and take a look here. So for each single row right here, instead of going up to size each time, we should go up to row. But notice that row starts at 0, but if we think about our example, row starts at 1. So one way we could change this is just have column start at 1 and be less than or equal to size, like that. And if we run this, we see that we haven't changed anything yet, that this still gives us the same thing, 4 by 4. All right, so 1, and now the first time through, we want this to be a 1. Second time, we want it to be a 2, right, in terms of how many asterisks get printed, how many times this inside loop runs. And this is the limit of the loop. So what do we do for that? Actually, sorry. This one should be, I think this should be 0. And this should be 1 up here, like that. Okay, I think this will help. So the first time through, we want this to be a 1. Second time, we want it to be a 2, and so forth up until 4. And those values actually are captured right here. The first time through, the value of row is 1. Second time through, after we do this, it's going to be a 2, and so forth. So all we need to do is change size to row. So I hope, again, that you think about this and you think about these steps of where we're going and you try these on your own before you come back and look at this as a solution. This is somewhat of a one-sided conversation, so for maximum benefit, you need to spend some time thinking about it and trying it out. All right, so here we go. So let's take a look. So we display the rows, and for each row, we do this. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens. Voila, look at that. It gives us what we want. All right, now this starts to get a little bit tougher. Now what we want to do is we want to think about how, well, I guess we could, I'm just thinking about if we want to make another version of this program. Let's keep it here in the same one. Display all the rows, display a triangle shape of asterisks. Okay. So that's good. And now what we're going to want to do is something similar, but we are going to display a diamond shape, a triangle of, a centered triangle. So this next version, we want it to be like the top half right here of this diamond shape. So just this top. So if we think about this, we have to think about how many spaces in does each of these need to be indented. So this one here is indented 0. So this is the opposite. So here what we have, if we write this down, this up at the top is line 1, and then here's line 2, and then here's line 3, and here's line 4. So if we sort of draw columns of where these characters, that is the asterisks, all are, like that, we can see how many spaces indented. So on the first row, we have to add an extra 1, 2, 3, extra 3 spaces. And then this last one, we add 0 spaces. So 3 on that one, 2 on this one, 1 on this one. Okay, so this top one is an extra 3 before we print, and then on this one it's an extra 2, and an extra 1, and an extra 0. So we need to have something that counts down from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0, which is a loop that tells us how many extra characters, right there, extra spaces that we're going to print. All right, so let's see if we can do that with our existing code. So display a centered triangle shape of asterisks. So this is for each row, and before we display that single row, here's the key idea in terms of the design. Display correct number of leading spaces to center the triangle. Okay. So this is going to be some other kind of for loop. And so we need some extra spaces, right? Spaces. So here we're going to have for spaces equals something, spaces less than equal to something, and spaces plus plus. And then what we do here is we just print that single space like that. So we're counting, right? How many? So we could start it, if we started it at, let me see, at 1. So what are the values that we want again? We want to go from 3 to 1, 0. So first time through, how could we get a 3? Well, if we put that as a 3, that's going to be an issue because if we change the size, so it needs to be size minus 1. That's how we could get to 3. So let's say we start at size minus 1, like that. So it starts at 3, and each time we subtract instead of doing plus plus. So first time it's 3, and then how do we know when we're done? Well, we know when it gets to 0, we don't do anything else, right? So as long as it's bigger than 0, bigger than 0, because when it's 0, we print 0 spaces, so that doesn't really matter. So the first time through, spaces is our counter, starts off at 3 and goes 3, 2, 1. It's going to do this 3 times. That is, it's going to print 3 spaces. And if we look at it, that's what we want. We want to print 3 spaces. First time through, right there. Second time through, let's see if we get the value of 2. Let's check that out. So second time through, we go and we're through the, so row goes from 1 up till 2. So we want it to be a 2, right? So in fact, we can't just make this 3 each time. It has to be size minus row. And really I should be not giving this all away, right? I should be running it, seeing that it's incorrect, and going from there. So the first time through row is 1, so 4 minus 1 gives us 3. Second time through row goes up to 2. So then here we have 4 minus 2 gives us 2, and that's correct. That's the number that we want. So let's try this out now. Aha, here we go. Our nice centered shape. Okay, so before we go on, why don't you take this and then yourself think about now, how could I take this to add the corresponding part below for the diamond? And once you've done that, then come back and take a look at the video and see what else we did here. If I don't want to have to think about this section of code, I could just for now comment it out using a block style comment and focus on just this one part of the code. Like that, okay? And the ending thing, let's put a few extra new line characters in there so we can move that down out of the way. Okay, so there it is. So we want the corresponding part here. So we could just put those lines of code and reverse them. But notice that this middle one, which is the size, that doesn't get duplicated, right? So we just are going to have to start with a line of 3 down here and go from there. Okay, let's see. So display centered triangle shape. So display top half of a centered triangle shape of asterisks. And then here we display the leading spaces. And then down here we display a single row of asterisks. And then that's it, right? So it's the same kind of idea as this. But we need to somehow do it in reverse, right? So how many rows is it going to be? So in the first row, what is the size of that first row going to be? It's going to be 3. So it's going to start at size minus 1. So our size in our example is 4. 4 minus 1 is 3. And we're going to keep going while row is bigger than 1. And this time we're going to be subtracting row minus minus. Okay, so row starts at, if our sample size is 4, starts at size minus 1, starts at 3, then it's going to go 2, then it's going to go, well, here it would stop at 1, so we say it's bigger than 0. How about that? Okay, so that's the top half. So now again we have to display the correct number of leading spaces to center the triangles. So now the number of leading spaces is the opposite. So the number of leading spaces in the bottom here is going to be 1, 2, and 3. So similar kinds of code, but here now we have to count up 1, 2, and 3. Let's go take a look. Number of leading spaces. Here we go. So the spaces has to start at 1 the first time, and each time we're going to add to it, and spaces less than the size. 1, 2, 3, right? Let's see about that. So spaces is equal to, starts at 1. So the first time through, it's going to give us here we got to do something here. We want to do it just one time, right? Yeah. So our limit has to be also 1. And then the second time it's going to be 2. So we can't start it at 1. It has to be related to size or to the row or something like that, right? So so the row is going to be this is going to be 3, 2, and 1. So here, if we had size minus row, so the first time it would be a 3, because 4 minus 3 would be 1, right? So the size is 4 minus 1 is 3. So the first time through row is equal to 3. I'm thinking out loud here. So 4 minus 3 the first time is going to give me the value of 1. But I think that that's what we want to have for our ending condition here. So spaces, it starts at 1, and spaces, well, spaces is, so the first time this should also equal a 1. So row, the first time 4 minus 1 is 3. So size is 4 minus 3 is 1. maybe like this. Yeah, see, this gets a little tricky, right? There's a lot of different ways of doing it too. Size minus row, and then, okay. And then how many asterisks do we display? So column, column, less than row. Well, let's see here. The first time I want to display 3 of them. So row, I think maybe this is correct, the number, because this is related to row. Maybe not. Size minus 1. This is display the bottom half. Yeah, it gets a little bit tricky. So the size of row for the bottom half, oh, these are extra. The size should be 3 and then 2 and 1. So we're going to have to change things. So the row, the first time is 3. Yeah, that's right. It's 3, 2 and 1. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, let's try this out. That seems reasonable to me. So let's try it out. Let's compile and run it. Now, usually things go wrong. It's not that easy, right? It usually doesn't just work out the first time. We got lucky. Usually there's problems. You have to go back and think about it. And it's kind of complicated. So the next thing that we could add to this would be considering how then you could take this diamond in the middle of your whole output screen. So when we run the program, it would be right here in the middle of the screen, like underneath these dots, rather than up in the upper left-hand corner. So you'd have to, depending on how many of these there are, add some extra spaces at the top, and then for each line before you print it, add some additional extra spaces to center it in the screen. So it's similar to what we did right now for the extra leading spaces here, except for it's an additional for loop that we have to add before we print each one of these lines to move the whole thing over, an additional for loop at the top to move the whole thing down. So it starts getting a little bit ugly, and this is where having functions would be really nice. And that's an add-on for a separate topic. Okay, so I'm going to leave that last little part as an exercise for you to think about. And let me just mention that this is the top half of the centered triangle. And before we actually display the single row of asterisks, and so we would put it here. Add code here to center on screen, right? So that would go in there. And similarly for the bottom half, we'd have to do the same sort of a thing. Add the code there. All right.